All right, guess we can get started. Good day and a warm welcome to our participants joining us from around the world. We're delighted to host this webinar on consumer protection in the Global South as part of Financial Inclusion Week 2020. My name is Raya Ashraf. I manage the Innovation Fund for Mobile Money at BRAC's Social Innovation Lab, where we design, pilot, and research innovations in development, including those in mobile financial services across BRAC's program areas. We do this work with the support of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and a number of partners, many of whom are joining the discussion today. So on to our conversation for tonight. We're focusing on the rapid growth of mobile financial services, which has arguably been the single most significant contributor of increased financial inclusion in emerging markets today. It has facilitated access to cheap and reliable financial services to an ever-increasing formerly unbanked population segment. In innovative mobile money services like M-Pesa, that's based in Kenya or Tanzania, and like bKash in Bangladesh, they've grown so large that their names have become verbs used synonymously with mobile money payments. And over the last 10 years, BRAC has scaled digital financial services in communities where we work, creating meaningful use cases, particularly for women from low-income households. This year, digital payments have scaled at unprecedented rates. As of June 12th, the World Bank has found that 195 countries have planned, introduced, or adapted more than 1,000 safety net payments and other social protection measures for the most vulnerable populations in wake of COVID-19. And many of these payment schemes are in the form of digital transfers. DFS has also become the primary means of transfer for emergency cash payments, remittance, loan repayments, other essential services, particularly for low-income communities. And in the Global South, much of this growth was supported by service providers and community organizations scrambling to open accounts, train users, relay essential information to consumers, and often this was done remotely, particularly given the lockdown and constraints of COVID-19. Now, with this growth, unfortunately, MFS has also rapidly become a conduit for fraud or other activity to varying extents depending on the degree of tech or product literacy, scale of agent network supporting MFS, and how well it is possible to regulate and monitor ecosystems serving large number of previously unbanked and often illiterate populations, making poor communities more vulnerable to the misuse of data or frauds through innovative means such as false promotions, provider impersonation, extra charges at agent sites, data hacking, and many other ways that we are seeing emerging these days. Now, tackling this issue needs holistic support from ecosystem players. Consumer protection frameworks, when designed and implemented effectively, can improve consumers, particularly women's, trust, confidence, and control over digital payments and mobile money, enabling an uptake of financial services. So we move on to our conversation for tonight, which is how can we then make financial inclusion safer for the world's most vulnerable? How can we design better systems for emerging challenges? This is what we're here to learn more about today. Our conversation will be divided into 3 segments. We'll first hear from practitioners and providers, then what the research says and where we're going with policy, and finally, learn more about the global strategies and regional goals that have been set by strategic partners. We'll be collecting audience questions from Facebook Live, Zoom, and FeedLoop, and posing them to speakers intermittently throughout the discussion. So please use your chat functions and messages as you listen to our conversation. Now on to our speakers. We have a fantastic panel with us today. We have Moon Sherin, who manages BRAC Microfinance's digital cluster. BRAC Microfinance program has been working on financial inclusion for several decades now. This year, they went further by digitizing emergency cash grants as part of BRAC's COVID response, and by scaling mobile money collection for loan payments countrywide. By working closely with their clients, the program has also built an extensive training and onboarding process with campaigns to support these clients better. Next, we have Kezom Masali, the Asia Pacific Regional Lead of Better Than Cash Alliance. Better Than Cash Alliance is a global partnership of 75 governments, companies, and international organizations that accelerates the responsible transition from cash to digital payments in order to reduce poverty and drive inclusive growth. Third, we have Major General Sheikh Mohammed Monirul Islam, the Chief External and Corporate Affairs Officer at bKash Limited. bKash is, of course, the largest mobile financial services provider in Bangladesh and has been working closely with development organizations and the government to ensure mobile money reaches the most hard-to-reach corners of the country. Then we have with us Raf Mazer, who directs Innovations for Poverty Action's Consumer Protection Research Project, integrating experimental research into the development of consumer protection policies in the context of financial inclusion. Next, Tohurul Hassan, who is the program manager of the Digital Financial Services Lab at A2I at the ICT Ministry in Bangladesh. A2I has been leading the Bangladesh government's efforts to digitize G2P payments and incorporate innovations at local government levels to improve public service delivery sustainably. Mr. Hassan will be representing the government's voice in this conversation. And finally, we have Snigdha Ali, who's the Bangladesh Program Officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Financial Services for the Poor arm. So thank you all of our panelists for joining us tonight. And let's get this conversation started. We will start with the voices from the ground. So just to give a bit of more context on Bangladesh, but also which can be extended to the global South. In Bangladesh, like in other countries in South Asia and the rest of the global South, there is a significant gender gap in access to financial services. While there are many economic and socioeconomic roots to this gap, in the last few years, we have found that despite digital financial services becoming more infrastructurally accessible, women remain behind. We find many women experience tech phobia due to their relative lack of digital literacy, which impedes their ability to use services effectively. And this is where organizations such as BRAC and our many partners who work at the community level come in. Now, my first question is to Moon Appa. How do you think we can effectively design and communicate clear and easy to understand products and terms for low-income women, given their relatively limited financial services experience or capabilities? And we would love to hear what you've learned from your experience at BRAC Microfinance regarding onboarding and digital literacy for these same clients. Sure. If you may, please.
Sure. Thank you very much, Ra, for the question. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Okay, great. So a very good evening to all of you. As you know, that BRAC has always done focal group discussions and then a pilot product with extensive onboarding of clients and staff, and then we go for scaling up a project. So for this particular question, I would like to use an example of a digital intervention that we introduced a few years back. So BRAC started its journey in the digital space since in 2012. And in partnership with bKash, what we did was we introduced long-term savings collection of our clients through bKash. And that time, what we did was we had rigorous campaigns and onboarding for clients so that they get used to Bcash and the payment methods, because it was very new back then. So our frontline workers, the field team, what they did was they had visual aids to educate our clients in the group meetings. And they also taught them how to make the payment. Like if they're making a payment for savings installment, then how should they do the payment? And what we did was, for that, we had like process cards for the payment method. And we also hired about 400 staff, particularly for this project, so that they can teach our clients on how to make the payments and get familiar with Bcash. Another thing that we also did that time was we have customer service assistant at the branch levels who are mostly female. What we did was we trained them as Bcash agents so that they can serve our clients regarding Bcash related queries, and also open wallet for our clients. The reason being is that our clients, who are female clients, they felt more comfortable with the BRAC employees. And since they were female, they felt comfortable coming to them and opening wallets. And at that time, we could open about 300,000 wallets for our clients. And another thing I would like to mention is this really helped us to make our client familiar with the Bcash platform, and so that they can adapt Bcash more easily. And so I think, in my opinion, it's very important to make sure that clients are able to understand the benefits of the product. And also, we always put our clients first. And when it comes for financial services, we try to educate our clients as much as possible. Thank you, Raya.
Thank you, Mugnappa. So, I mean, that was a fantastic start to begin with, the fact that you mentioned how important it is to have the people from the community support these women, low-income communities in general, but particularly for women, to help bridge that gap between technology and services with familiar faces, but a lot of hand-holding to begin with, to build that confidence, that trust in the technology. And how, I think another important thing point you mentioned was the organizational capacity, and really helping that change management from your own organizational perspective. So we'll come back to you for a bit more in a few minutes, but I'd like to move on to Kezum. Kezum, as you are working with partners across the Asia Pacific, I wonder if you've seen any trends emerging in the region along the lines of consumer digital literacy, or just protection along the issues of consumer protection. And I suppose, as a follow-up to that question, I would also like to add that should consumer protection agencies in emerging markets emphasize financial education programs for women, or should they also now be shifting resources towards developing and enforcing effective disclosure and pricing transparency instead? So just wanted to hear your thoughts on this, if you may, please.
Thank you, and what a great question. So I think, to start off with, digital payments, financial services, as you also highlighted, the landscape has undergone major shifts. Themes like digital economy, digital cooperation have taken center stage as key enablers to advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the consequences of that is that we're seeing many more governments relying on digital government-to-person payments, or even company members of the Better Than Cash Alliance, such as the FMCG companies, increasingly using digital payments to reach employees and partners in their supply chains. Secondly, there's tremendous amount of innovation happening, and these are driven primarily by the advancements in big data, in artificial intelligence, in machine learning, and they're expanding the opportunities at a remarkable pace. But at the same time, these innovations also raise new ethical concerns and significant risk for the end users or the consumers. And thirdly, I think COVID-19 has shown us that the volumes are just going to continue to grow and grow at a much rapid pace. So many of the low income or the underserved users remain quite unfamiliar with or distrust digital payments or digital financial services. So closing that gap and more broadly the digital divide gap is going to require an even stronger focus on inclusion, especially for those that are, at the margins, and many of them include women, as you had also highlighted. And for us at the Better Than Cash Alliance, especially as we work with our government members, our company members, and our international humanitarian organization members, these shifts are influencing a broader discussion and dialogue on who needs to be responsible, what it means to be responsible, and how to be responsible. And I believe this presents an incredible opportunity for governments, for everyone to work together to advance that agenda. And Nishat, I would argue that Raya, I would argue that responsibility towards consumer is, it's not a zero-sum game. It's going to be about additional value creation, and therefore the foundational investments in capability continues to be really important, and at par with the emerging responsibility on enforcing that effective disclosure and pricing transparency that works for consumers. And these are consumers who are going to be the next billion users of digital payments and digital financial services, who routinely face higher barriers, who experience a material impact on their lives if their funds are lost, right? So on capability, I think, as you mentioned, the case for, while the case for expanding digital payments to women is clear, there are still some very deep and systemic barriers that make that journey quite ambitious. And we see in the South Asia and the Southeast Asia region, recognizing three key barriers and our members acting upon them. One is the low capabilities and the limited access to assets like phones and personal ID that deprive women of the basic toolkits for digital payments and digital financial services. The second is not just the regulatory barriers, but also the social barriers that hinder information from reaching the underserved, the unserved, in particular women, and limit their ability to transact independently. And lastly, the inadequate data and service design, which means basically that these services of digital payments and the financial services, they don't really fit the lived realities of these people. And some of the emerging investments in capability building that I'm seeing, that that the Alliance is seeing across the region is, firstly in really, sort of upping the game and the conversation and the actions on gender disaggregated data. Secondly, the inclusive policies around the underserved, including women. Thirdly, the foundational investments, mobile phones, digital ID, literacy, etc. The fourth is basically guaranteeing their seat at the table, whether it's in product design, whether it's in policy decision making. And lastly, sort of, really that resulting in very user-centric offerings and communications. We also see a greater movement towards serving as stewards for end user data, especially by some of our government members in the larger Asia Pacific region. And they acknowledge that most existing data protection and privacy compliance models, they anchor on consent. However, users, especially the users that we're talking about today, they do not often understand what they're agreeing to and face the cognitive overload, which leads them to overlook very important clauses. So that means that, users often lack the tools and the knowledge needed to manage their financial services and how their data is being used, which often drifts beyond the scope of consent, right? Or inability to hold the financial service providers accountable for its protection. And our members share three consents that we see the sort of responsibility agenda moving towards. One is that the consent models are rendered irrelevant because end users are basically ill-equipped to understand rights of ownership to their data and poorly positioned to exercise them. And when that data drifts to purposes and actors are beyond the scope of consent, as it often does. Secondly, end users are seldom in the know. And with the inadequate and often missing regulations in many of the markets in the global south, few providers actually proactively invest in sufficiently broad data protection, thus leaving many of the consumers exposed to risk that and with no one held accountable. So I would say, at the Better Than Cash Alliance, as we work on the Responsible Digital Payments Guidebook this year with many of our 75 members across the world, there is a very, very deep acknowledgement, much more prominent in a post-COVID or a continued COVID world in the region, is that within the digital payments ecosystem, there are great many opportunities to do right by the consumers, and it is going to take proactive partnerships and accountability where the onus shifts from the end users to actors in the value chain and the ecosystem. And we're really excited about this in the region and across the world where we work with our members.
Thank you, Kizum, and those are great points. And this idea of consent and building that into really rethinking consent and how we base our assumptions on that understanding of our users, particularly from low-income communities, really understanding to what extent they have this information, to what extent they can hold service providers accountable. All of these issues are even more real for a community that may be illiterate in many cases, technologically and illiterate, or may not have access to a lot of the infrastructure and resources that's needed to connect with these services and to gather more information on their own rights and protections. So I think I'd like to go back to Munmunappa at this point, just based on what Kizum shared. Could you please share with us what kind of interventions BRAC has taken alongside bKash and the service providers that you're working with the clients you're working with for consumer protection? So what kind of interventions you're looking at, what kind of process changes or communication you're exploring? Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat that question again? Are you trying to understand what we did during the pandemic, or?
About both. So we're happy to learn more about your response during the pandemic, because particularly during the pandemic, of course, we saw huge growth in account opening, in cash transfers. I think that is more topical, but in general, if you've adopted any other process-related changes or interventions that grow consumer protection.
First, I would like to highlight the fact that, how quickly our clients have adapted to the digital technologies in this unprecedented disaster. Usually it takes months for us to do a pilot for a product and then scale up, as I mentioned earlier. But in the pandemic, what we have seen that since digital transactions, what we did was we completely went for a digital transaction because of the fact that social distancing was an issue. And we dispersed emergency cash transfers and savings to our microfinance clients and BRAC participants in the pandemic. The reason being is we immediately shift to digital transactions rather than wasting our time in manual interventions, is because we understood that this is what it was needed and our clients needed that money instantly. So our field staff, what they did was they assisted clients over the phone. Even to open wallets, as Raya mentioned, that we open wallets during the pandemic. And one of our study that we did in June that showed that about 37% of our clients, the participants that we had in the survey was 1,634. And among those participants, 37 clients, they opened their wallets in the first 3 months of the pandemic. And it was our staff were continuously motivating them to open wallets and helping them to do so. We also saw that there were people who were opening wallets because another person, their neighbor has opened a wallet and they've received cash transfers. That also triggered a lot of wallet opening. And our government was also giving 8 transfers through digital wallets. And another thing I would like to mention, as Ryan mentioned at the very beginning, that we introduced branch-based wallets for our clients so that they can pay their loan installment. And for that particular project, it was done nationwide. We have the branch wallets nationwide. And what we did was we informed clients over the phone that this is a particular number they need to send their installment to, and the payment process, how they're going to do it, and to let us know once the transaction is done, and they do not have to incur any cost for this particular transaction. And on average, at the moment, we have 50,000 transactions every day through bKash. So from this cash transfer intervention, as well as the branch wallet, like what I would like to share is the lesson that we have learned. What we have seen that in the cash transfers survey that we did was participants were using digital wallets. Like out of 1634 participants, 77% had mobile phones and 76% have digital wallets out of this 77%. But the surprising part was only 24% participants knew how to use digital wallets. So it was their family members who were helping them, and they usually know how to do cash in, cash out. So, but overall, what we've seen that our participants were really happy to receive cash transfers digitally. And so the experience that we had was more like we need to continue innovating with new initiatives and put our clients first and better equip them to access financial services so that we can integrate them to the digital ecosystem. And we need to work more on how to teach clients on usage of these digital interventions. Thank you, Ryan.
Great, thank you, Munmunappa. So just holding that thread forward, I'd like to bring in now Major General Monirul Islam, who's leading a lot of this work on the bKash side. Now, Monirul sir, bKash has set great examples for the MFS sector in Bangladesh by instilling thorough internal and external fraud deterrence mechanisms. But of course, by virtue of its popularity and scale, bKash clients are also some of the highest to be targeted by fraudsters or other entities hoping to take advantage of low literacy or low tech literacy clients. So what are some of the ways bKash is monitoring its vast agent network, which it's definitely the service provider is reliant on, but also how is it building technology to ensure consumer protection? So what type of technologies hold the most promise or could be most effective in delivering these essential and clear product information to improve financial behavior? Yes, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Raya. There are two aspects to this particular question that you raised. One is the technology arrangement to monitor vast agent network. And the second, of course, is the products that we actually offer to our customers and what kind of awareness that we need to impart in terms of making them aware of the product and also how to remain protected from the fraudsters. First of all, I must say that bKash is a fintech company, and from day one, bKash decided to deploy the world-best technology platform. The reason is very simple. We deal with people's money, and it is of inviolable responsibility to ensure that that money is completely secured and remains protected. Now, we have a very vast agent network. You would know that 220,000 agents are deployed all over the country for making sure that people actually get the service at a walking distance. And these activities of the agents must be monitored on a 24-hour basis. So real-time monitoring is done through bKash technology platform. And that includes not only the agents, but the distribution house who supervise the activities of the agents as well. Now we have a service operation room. In short, we call it SOC. It's manned 24/7, and it has large screens that depicts the real-time data in the form of heat map on screens displaying different transactional activities of all agents. And we have markets like cash-in market, cash-out market, and it is important that the liquidity, both in terms of the e-money and cash money, must be made available in those agent points. Otherwise, the customers will go back being unattended. So swap room officers can clearly know the balances or shortfall in any particular area and notify the commercial team to address the issue immediately. Besides, there are algorithms to understand unusual transaction pattern of any agent. And once that is detected, the technology team will share that with the anti-money laundering team, and they will investigate and analyze. And if any particular agent is found involved in any kind of suspicious transaction, then suspicious transaction report or suspicious activity report is disclosed to Bangladesh Financial Intelligence Unit. bKash has also introduced Screening Intelligence System Engine, SIS engine, an automated global sanction screening for customer due diligence, enhanced due diligence, and foreign remittance. Whosoever is sending and whosoever is receiving, they are screened according to the global sanction screen list. So no one in the list who are known to be criminals, terrorists, they would possibly not be able to send the money or receiving the money according to the global sanction list. bKash has a regional compliance team. Now, this monitoring is not only done from the technology platform, these are also done on ground, because unless the agents are visited, whatever they are doing cannot be actually known. So we have regional anti-money laundering compliance officer, we have field compliance assessment officer, and we have also field training officer. The training officer imparts the AML training to all of the agents and merchants and distribution house employees, because they need to know the basics about anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism. Very recently, we have launched a AML 360 digital solution that facilitates real-time AML CFT compliance assessment done in the field and being communicated directly to the head office, where it is immediately collated and synthesized to prepare different control reports with findings and recommendation for remedial measures, if any. Now, having said that,
if I may interrupt you now, and we'll come back to you. I know that we're a bit tight on time, but let me come back to you with a couple of questions that we've gathered from our audience as well. So it seems that because, as you mentioned, that you're using a variety of technologies as well as very resource-rich modalities for monitoring fraudulent activity and systemic fraudulent activity. I would like to bring the conversation back to that human aspect of it. Number one, as you can imagine, a lot of this may happen outside the technical system, right? Like when for example, a consumer is in front of their agent, if something happens at that point, is bKash basically thinking of ways to integrate better messaging, better training and sensitization of agents regarding consumer safety and protection during that interaction, or are there other human ways that you're building into your design that pay attention to the needs of a variety of clients, of course, some of whom may be using the service for the first time, may not be familiar with a lot of the protections that they can take advantage of. at a second interaction or the third interaction. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I was actually coming to that. The agents are also trained on commercial aspects so that whenever there is any customer seeking to get assistance from them, they're the one who could possibly tell them that this is the way that a particular service could be obtained or a particular product could be utilized. Besides that, whenever we design any product or service, we actually carry out a kind of a study to understand what should be communicated to the consumers. So there is a marketing team and they would actually do the ATL and BTL communication, letting people know the use case of this particular product. And beside, of course, there are attempts of fraudulent activities all the time, all across the world. And we also know and we see that it happens in Bangladesh as well. It is part of social engineering that psychologically the fraudsters motivate or allure the customer to do certain things. And then eventually they transact the money out of their own account. So there is a program that it is called Anti-Fraud Awareness Campaign. And you possibly have seen those TVCs in different television channels that we actually air for consumer to understand that they are not supposed to do certain things. Especially, they must not share their confidential identification number, the personal identification number, the one-time password that we generate for the purpose of registration and maintaining an account. So this is one thing that will continue all the time because we have to address this issue, roll out the information to as many of our customers as possible in repeated time and come up with different kind of awareness program depending on the tricks the fraudsters change all the time. So this is one thing that we continuously do in terms of making our customers aware, first of all, how to use the product and how to remain protected.
Thank you, sir. So I'd like to move on to Raf now, just to push the conversation onto where the evidence is. And as we can hear from our testimony so far, while fraud is on the rise, there are also many ways, systemic, technological or interaction or otherwise, where these vulnerabilities can be prevented and we can build in resources and systems to protect clients. So Raf, you recently released some research on COVID-19 related financial vulnerabilities in Kenya, Uganda, and Nigeria, where you analyze social media to understand consumer sentiments. Are there certain policies that are linked to this learning or otherwise that are helping governments and also service providers prepare better? And if I may add on to that question, I realize it's a bit long still, but how realistic do you think the steps that are being taken around consumer protection are where an industry such as this MFS, the digital finance industry that is so focused on growth, how realistic are these protection mechanisms, particularly for women and low-income communities? Raf, over to you.
Excellent, thank you very much. So first, just to mention the social media analysis, which we presented 2 weeks ago in a webinar, that is now available on the IPA website, poverty-action.org. So if people want to look at that analysis, and what we did in that was we looked at a year's worth of social media content across 3 markets and tried to organize it around different consumer protection topics and themes. And we're able to look at, as you mentioned, to flag certain issues related to COVID-19. For example, in Nigeria, we saw a spike in fraud issues after the declaration of global pandemic on March 11th. And so I think that the most basic thing that a regulator can do, which providers probably already do to an extent, as the general has indicated, is to leverage new data sources for new monitoring tools. And I think it's not just about one source of data, it's about comparing many. For example, we're looking at customer care records over a year and a half in Uganda right now with the Communications Commission. And we see a decrease in the number of customer care inquiries after the declaration of a pandemic, which is sort of counterintuitive. So you think, but we're able to look at the social media data and see the posts on social media increased. So it tells you it's more likely an issue that there was understaffing or inability to get through than that there was a decrease in complaints. And so I think that using those types of data, we also use surveys. We've just completed surveys in several markets on consumer protection. And we asked people questions about if they were approached by anyone regarding a scam or an offer related to COVID-19 or a government payment. And we see, quite a significant number, about 20 to 30% report that. But fortunately, we see that many of them don't fall victim. And what's been helpful is we ask them, well, how did you know this was a scam? And you see certain rules of thumb or heuristics people are starting to adopt in more mature markets, which is, it was from just a regular phone number, right? It wasn't from a short code branded with a provider. They were asking me for coverage. I think you can leverage sort of simple tricks that consumers have learned and communicate those to the broader population, because we don't all have to be data security experts to stay safe. And some effective government campaigns, like in Nigeria, they've released a lot of public statements and messaging around fraudulent government payment programs, because there's a rise in that. And so they're really proactive in April in getting that messaging out already through the regulator and through others. And then I think there's some design aspects to better protect from scams. I think looking at how easy it is to do things like SIM swap. I think we need better protections on SIM swap. There was a recent scandal with Equity Bank in Kenya where staff were having people enroll in the mobile banking service and then told them, you'll be getting a call to activate this from their own private line, and getting people's PIN and other details and doing a SIM swap and stealing the money from their bank account. So you need internal controls around particular vulnerable activities. And that's the kind of thing where providers need to set the policies, but regulators need to make sure they're all doing the policies. I think we've heard from eCash, which has extensive monitoring, and it'd be great to see what is working, what are best practices from providers become the standards that the regulators set. And then I think we also need to respect that not all digital customers want to interact digitally. There was a scandal in the US regarding one of the Cash App. It's a major payments platform, and people would run into problems with their account, and they would try to contact customer care. Cash App, like many Silicon Valley firms, doesn't have a customer care line. You have to go online, and a lot of times it's delayed. And so people were looking for the customer care line, and so fraudsters have put fake customer care lines for Cash App on web pages that look like legit web pages, and so they're calling those up. And then you think you're talking to customer care, so you share information you shouldn't have, and they lose money that way. So we need to still have these channels for people who don't want to. About agents as a key consumer protection point. So those are just some things we're seeing that can be done in terms of better analysis or monitoring, and also some and then this question about how realistic Is it to see steps being taken on consumer protection in digital finance where it's focused on growth? So I think that's kind of a product specific question, right? I think I'm less worried about that tension with payments products because I think the safety and security of your payments network is pretty essential to people wanting to use it. And so I think there's a harmonization of purpose there. I am worried about this with digital credit. I have worked in consumer lending for a long time from the policy side, and you can make a lot of money doing a lot of not treating customers well. And I get worried with some of these products that are expanding rapidly where, it's like the overdraft facilities you're seeing in Africa now, where people can buy consumer goods on overdraft of their mobile money wallets, and then you can just sweep the repayments through the mobile money wallet. And so you kind of have a captured consumer, like how we've seen over indebtedness amongst government salary workers who take payroll loans in markets and get over leveraged, but the lender doesn't mind over leveraging them because they can just sweep every month when they get their salary. So I am really worried about digital credit. I don't think it's a problem that the industry will solve. I think it's one where you absolutely need regulatory action.
Right. Raf, just to follow that up with a question that I'm seeing coming up from the audience as well. How do you think this data can be collected in countries in the global south, right? Of course, we can do these surveys and analyze social media. That's actually a great way to do it. But for a lot of these users, they may not even know that they've been scammed until it's too late. I mean, for Bangladesh and particularly for BRAC, I know that we've been following up with a lot of phone calls to our clients and really putting a lot of human resources behind understanding this, the scale of this problem, and seeing whether each customer is experiencing the services correctly. So any ideas on how the data can be collected from users and communities during times, particularly during the pandemic where door-to-door visits are limited?
Yeah, so we had to pivot with our data collection and go to surveys. And so go to phone surveys, sorry. And so what we've been doing is random digit dial method. Which is get that are live in a market, and then you do random dialing, and that's worked. It's been kind of, we've been able to implement it in the pandemic. It's a fairly simple process. It has issues. It gives you a biased sample, so we are much more male, educated, and urban than you would want to be. But if you were to work with providers with their list of consumers, and they could take a sample that is more appropriately weighted. I mean, I think you could do the phone survey method with some good effect, because I've been pleasantly surprised in terms of the willingness to participate rate. I mean, it's a long survey we've been doing, 30 minutes or more on the phone. I think it's one of the benefits of the pandemic. Everyone didn't have anywhere to go, so they were willing to talk. But yeah, I mean, I think the phone survey methods is something IPA has learned a lot about, and there's a few blogs we've put out about the pros and cons of the phone survey. I love this idea to hear this account opening support via phone. And I think also agents become more important where mobility is limited, right? Because the agent is going to be in the community, even if your enumerators or your supervisory staff are not there. Then the last thing is just one of the benefits of digital is there's more data that you can access remotely. So this complaints data analysis we've been doing, right? It's millions of customer care logs, and we've worked with the MNOs to add in gender, age, and location tags as well. And so we're looking at a year. They'll have about 30 or more categories of like which product it was. So you can see which gender, which product, which time, which location, and you can map out this experience. And we've been doing it historically, but I don't think it's the kind of thing that would be hard for a customer care team to do a data dump every week. And if you're a regulator, if it's a standardized template, you can, through Stata or through other applications, you can pull descriptive statistics just by running the code every week. And so then you've got your dashboard, which is good for the whole industry, because you can let them know if, there's been a spike in fraud on some providers. You can share with the entire industry. We're seeing some scams related to SIM swap coming up. So maybe, let your team know.
Thank you. Thank you, Raf. So, I mean, it's fantastic to hear how there are ways to learn right from the customers, right? Especially if they're not connected through the internet or through other web-based services for reporting, self-reporting their own cases. So phone, it is interesting to hear how you've worked with service providers on targeting specific groups. And we see that it may be particularly important to use this method to understand and gather information from women who may not be readily available for spot interviews or may not show up on social media as frequently as men. So moving on to Mr. Torul Hassan, who's representing the public sector's perspective in this conversation. Tutul Bhai, A2I is investing a ton of resources and knowledge into building the ecosystem for innovations in the public sector. And part of this work is also to ensure that these innovations are regulated the right way and ensure the highest quality of public services in delivery. And as we've heard from the rest of the panelists today, that it's important for there to be these regulatory frameworks in place that aid not just the consumers in terms of how they're going to ask for an explanation for in case they face challenges, but also to regulate the providers. So, and in terms of the rules about disclosure, they often dictate the what and the how, without actually providing requirements to ensure customers are really understanding what is being disclosed to them in terms of terms and agreements. Should providers be required to demonstrate that the average consumer understands the terms and conditions of services offered? And is your team working on any policies that will further help this process along? Tutul Bhai, over to you.
Thank you. So before coming to your point, I just want to start my recent experience on the COVID-19 situation. The major cash transfer program that happened during the pandemic situation is like the salary disbursement for the 4 million garment workers, and later on financial assistance from Prime Ministers to 5 million poor household. So actually what I have seen the biggest or rapid onboarding for the low income group or disadvantaged group in the former financial system or digital financial system happens like when something happens or any event or any programs. So at that time, so the recent experience that I have had during the pandemic, so Monir Bhai also know. So I was present a lot of policy discussions, how these huge numbers of people will onboarded. So at that moment, actually, it is very difficult to maintain these types of process, like to properly disclose the terms and conditions, to properly educate the customers, actually, what is the process of operating his accounts, or what is the rules and regulations, what data he can share and what data he can't. During this payment in the government sector and like the 5 million household cash instance, many times I have heard from the mobile financial service provider that it is very difficult for them to maintain the AML and CFT instructions. So the way that government are looking to onboard these huge number or groups of people within a very short time, as you seen that within 1 month, our MFS provider opened nearly 3 million account. And then again, 2 months, we opened another nearly 5 million MFS account to provide this cash support program. So within a very like short time, so it is very difficult for them, like for the MFS service provider or even for the government, to maintain all the procedures and like to properly like disseminate or disclose the information, proper informations to the right beneficiaries. And what dangerous thing we do for these types of onboarding. So sometimes we have seen that we buy mobile SIM card for the beneficiary as they don't have any mobile or mobile SIM. So as we decided to provide this financial assistance to his mobile number, so sometimes we buy SIM on behalf of them. So as actually they are not like used to with this technology and they are not ready to use this technology, then what happens, basically they share his information. I can say the important information to the agents or his nearest person. As you know, we also managed 5,000 agent point all around the country. I have seen a lot of messages from our agent network. So they are sharing their customer MFS account screens that they want to reset the pin, how they can, it is not working, how that will work. So different types of things. So and even for the educated like client like us, if you see like Facebook or any other newspaper, so even we trust some phone call. So whether it is a right phone call or it is a phone call for the particular like mobile financial service provider, we trust and we share our important informations to the through this phone call. So actually, so it is very difficult for even government to protect this data when like I am individuals and I am sharing data without like justifying or without analyzing anything, and I am sharing and data I am fearing to lose my money. So what we have seen that actually it is not possible for government to take massive like financial awareness and financial education program for this massive group of people. And in Bangladesh, I don't have seen any like appropriate tools or communication mechanism how we can better communicate with this massive group. Like if we consider like the social safety net beneficiaries, we have almost 30 million or 35 million beneficiaries. So how you can communicate with large number of client group where they are not ready or they have some capabilities gap. Like in the recent studies and even from BRAC, we have seen that almost 50% people or client, they depends on others to operate their account. So in that case, they obviously share their important informations to like agents or any other person. So I think obviously MFS service provider or financial service providers need to proactive measurements to disclose their terms and conditions and information, as well as I think we need to collaborate with financial service provider as well as government and also the private organizations.
Thank you. Let me come back to you actually on what else A2I is doing on this matter. I'd like to quickly jump back to Munmun Appa actually at this stage, because I know that Munmun Appa mentioned that BRAC was doing quite a bit to inform clients because all of the clients microfinance program was working with were either ultra poor or in urban areas and yet ultra poor. So just in terms of the different streams of clients that you were working with, particularly for women, do you think any specific ways of communicating with them or following up with them worked that may be useful for scaling to the national level? As Tutul Bhai, Mr. Hassan fairly mentioned that it's hard under pressure to follow up at such a large scale. What do you think you've learned from BRAC's practice?
So if I actually can talk about the BRAC practice, that we did was our field staff extensively worked towards educating our clients and reaching our clients whenever they need it. So I think that really helped clients to be on board with these digital interventions. And if you're talking about in terms of how did we reach the UPG clients or the other programs, what we did was the digital team actually worked with other programs in terms of with messages so that they can reach their clients very quickly. So in the beginning, when we actually started working with UPG, they were the first ones to give cash transfers to their clients digitally. What we did was we prepared script for the field officers. We had an instruction on how they can do it, how they can open the wallets, what are the things they should convey the messages for their clients. So we worked in this particular areas because we did know that once we start these digital interventions, there will be occurrences of frauds and scams. So I would like to bring my focus in that particular topic as well, since I haven't talked about consumer protection yet. So what our staff would do is continuously raise awareness in the field and let them know that they shouldn't be sharing their pain with the agents. And as our service provider is bKash, bKash do not make any outbound calls. That's the message we wanted to give our participants, because as Tutul Bhai was mentioning and others were mentioning, that usually clients would get these fraud calls saying that they have won a lottery and they have to send this particular, transfer this particular money. So what we did was we tried to work around that area, continuously letting them know that they shouldn't be sharing this information. And if I actually, particularly, I think what we have understood that since the knowledge of our clients are very limited, we really need to work in this particular area. And for us, it's really important. We're working with our mobile financial service provider, bKash. And I feel that it's important for us to work with them as well as the regulators to make sure that our clients are protected. So I think the biggest trend that BRAC has is the field team. We can reach every corner, every client to convey any message that we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Munmunaf. So I'd like to move back to Kizom as well. Kizom, if you could kindly share any examples that you have from the broader region on how these follow-ups are happening. As Mr. Hassan mentioned, that this is very resource intensive. From BRAC's example as well, it needs that personal context and communication to follow up quickly with clients right as these transfers happen. But when we scale up, it may be difficult to reach that level of quality and focus on individual needs of clients. So do you have any examples from the rest of the region where such follow-ups are being integrated into the system, or other ways of communicating with clients or consumers that may not immediately realize that they're being targeted for fraud or any other scams? Kizom, please. Over to you.
Sure. It's a great discussion. Certainly not a straightforward answer. And I'll touch on a number of themes. One is that it's not going to be any one player's job to do that. And as the ecosystem builds out and gets more inclusive, I think there's a significant role for community organizations and civil societies to play at the local level. And this is, part of the broader theme that's also emerging in the, theme around open digital ecosystems, where it's not just about the digital public infrastructure, but it's also about the governance, which are the sort of broader national laws and rules that transcend just regulations into privacy and data localization conversations, to also then talking about communities, communities that either build on top of the infrastructure, but also communities that create that usage and support to really and truly build an inclusive local digital ecosystem. So that's one. And we see that themes emerging, whether it's pilots, whether it's policy dialogues, in India, of course. I know that Tutubai is here on the line. There's tremendous conversations that is regularly happening within Bangladesh, and it's such a great example where there's such tremendous government leadership as well as such tremendous collaboration with the private sector, where in COVID-19 we saw that that so many things could happen rather quickly because of that leadership from the government and the collaboration with the private sector. Um, the third theme is really around some of the technology around chatbots or video bots or SMS bots, and some of them respond to things like maybe the user does not have access to smartphones or connectivity, and it's just a feature phone user. How do you still engage and build that relationship? But obviously, as you are building these innovations and solutions, you're also building for a future state where access to an affordable smartphone is a reality. And this is that's another area where we're seeing great discussions and policy incentives being created for smartphone markets to really transcend and be more accessible and affordable, for example. So I think there's no one magic bullet. It's going to take a lot of us, and all of us, all the participants that are here today, part of our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kizam. You're absolutely right, and I think this is a good sign that that there are many parallels between what each of our panelists have said today, and that there is a sense of collaboration when, for example, A2I is speaking of just the massive scale at which this is, the accounts were opened during the pandemic, and just that needed very close collaboration with the service providers as well as community-based organizations who worked closely with consumers and the final users. And so just to move on to now, Snigdhapa, on the global agenda for financial inclusion, but also as we grow and expand mobile financial services, how do you see these global expectations and goals shifting on the matter of consumer protection? Do you see any emerging trends in financial education programming and or improved products and policies that are improving the MFS service experience, particularly for women from the region or beyond? Apa.
Thank you, Munmun. It's been a fantastic discussion so far. And as we know, the financial ecosystem is a complex set of a number of interconnected processes, right? And especially in these changing times of technology, economic parameters, and also the global issue that the pandemic that we are living in, the kind of risks that consumers face are also changing. So we need to have a better understanding of what kind of policies and services or interventions actually can reduce those risks and ensure that the consumers are protected, especially the underprivileged and the most vulnerable groups that we are talking about. And we need to have a coordinated efforts, as we have already heard from a number of sector representations, that we need to have a coordinated efforts to make any changes come true. See, consumer protection is also very important in terms of, say, enhancing gender equity. Because if we could ensure a safe processes or participation from women, it could make them, it could encourage them to engage in digital financial services, which will eventually, as we have seen in many research and studies linking the causal pathways between women's economic empowerment and decision-making power inside the household, that having control and having participated in financial matters increases their decision-making power, bargaining power inside the household, etc. And I'm very glad that Kazem touched upon the social norms when you mentioned one of the barriers that people have, the consumers have in terms of digital financial services. We need to be aware that while there's a global awareness of consumer protection, we also have to kind of think it regionally, contextually. We have to be aware of the particular socio-economic context of each country, and then come from the ground what would work best. Say, for example, we have seen unprecedented digitization of wages and G2P in the current times, right? But at the same time, trust is an important element when women go and get those accounts opened and learn how to use those accounts, navigate through different kinds of payments, cash out, cash in, cash out, etc. And trust is an crucial element because they trust the agent. For women who do not really know, are aware of how this technology or even the many features of the mobile phone works, they trust on the agent. And one recent study, I think on Togo, stated that women entrepreneurs who also rely on real-time payment have a difficulty trusting that the buyers who would just see that, who will show that the payment has gone, but not really gone, but they already are leaving the shops with the commodity, actually are losing money. So what I'm trying to say is that in terms of access to infrastructure, digital systems, we also have to have good policy, regulatory atmosphere. The environment has to be there. And at the same time, we have to understand the social norms that are at play, that we need to be mindful about when we are talking about any effective measures to be working at any specific country. I completely agree with Tutu, what he just mentioned about the lack of resources, the system, everything that a country like Bangladesh faces. But we have also seen how Bangladesh has been successful in children immunization, oral saline. Those were at that time seemingly difficult, impossible. But say, for example, again, coming back to BRAC's microfinance, opening mobile wallet nationwide, not only that, that may ensure access, but not stopping at that. Just proactively, when the agents keep on calling the clients, the microfinance clients, and iteratively explain to them what they can expect, what they can do, and how they're protected, I think is very, very important.
Thank you, Snigdha. And I think this focus on social norms is very important, because when we're talking about consumers that are particularly vulnerable, we also have to understand just the layers of disadvantages, or even just perceived disadvantages that we have to cross over to reach and really empower a client, a consumer, to understand the technology, to understand the benefits as well as the risks of these services, and find meaningful uses that truly help them take better control over their own resources and find more opportunities. I'd like to now go back to Monirul sir. Monirul sir, since we are on the topic of particularly reaching out to women, as a
Can you repeat your question? I just missed you for a while.
Yes, sorry. I think we had a little drop. So I'll go my question. Just a minute. Sorry. Yes. So how do you think service providers such as bKash can use product segmentation or service segmentation to reach out to women in particular? Are you trying new tools or new ways of communicating
First of all, when we actually design a product, we look at the pain points. If you recollect that the initial service that we brought in was person to person send money. And this was one particular pain point that we addressed, that people who come for livelihood in suburban and urban areas where we have the factories and work or job intensive kind of areas, they actually leave behind their families back home in the village. And at the end of the month, when they get the salary, especially the vast majority of the women workers in the garment industries, they need to send the money, and they used to actually use certain modalities which were not secure and convenient. So the first product that bKash brought in was send money, and that actually attracted attention, and it was a fantastic use case. Second was when we saw that women do not want to go to a particular shop for FlexiLoad because they don't want to share their number. That number is sometimes actually used for making calls, unwanted calls. So we came up with the mobile recharge solution. So anybody could possibly recharge the mobile right sitting at home and do it for others as well. The third thing that we thought, that foreign remittance, our big diaspora in the Middle East, in Singapore, Malaysia, they work and send their money back home to their wife, sometimes to their mother, and that was a problem. The informal remittance, the Hawala Hundi was very much in place. So we brought out a solution going to Bangladesh Bank that the banks will bring the remittance and bKash will provide the last mile solution. So today, you would be very happy to know that a large number of such remittance is done through the settlement is done through the bank, and the disbursement is done through bKash. So it's all about taking care of the need. And the last thing that we did is the digital KYC, the self-registration process. Women don't want to share that information and a photograph into an agent shop. And we saw the uptake of accounts from the female sector was far lower than the male gender. So this particular product that we brought in the market, that one can actually take a digital photo right at home, and there are certain technology through that particular OCR technology, we record all the information into a digital KYC. So the account is open, having done an eKYC, right sitting at home. The women are actually coping up or actually narrowing the gap between the male customers and female customers. You'll be happy that today the eKYC registration is 51% male, 49% female. Of course, the transaction done on a daily basis is about 64% male and 36% female. And hopefully this gap is going to go narrower depending on the technology solution that we are trying to come up with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry about the disconnectivity in between, but thank you to Monish sir for answering this question. I'd like to move over to Mr. Hassan now, once again, to Tulbhai, just to understand then how is A2I, how's the government approaching women, female consumers from a public service perspective? As we know that for service providers and community-based organizations, there are many different ways of approaching them, but there's also an inherent trust in the public service or public sector that can go beyond and reach scales that many other organizations cannot. And I would also ask to see if there are any plans going forward for not just during COVID, but in the post-pandemic world, how you're seeing all of these new users who've come into DFS. How do you plan on integrating them into the broader digital finance ecosystem going forward?
Thank you. Just a quick response to your questions. So there are three things. One, that recently we had a discussion, like last 2 weeks, we had several discussion with central bank, financial institution divisions, and National Curriculum and Textbook Board. So we are like negotiating three policy issues now. One is whether we can incorporate financial education in the school curriculum, so that we can award them from the school level on the financial issues and other things. The second one is whether we can observe a national financial literacy week a month, whether all the ecosystem players will jointly do awareness with the beneficiaries at all around the country. And third one is apart from the national financial inclusion strategy, whether we can develop a separate strategy for financial literacy. And also recently we have started to work with Better Than Cash Alliance. So we are doing a country diagnostic on digital payment ecosystem in Bangladesh, and where we have a plan to build a roadmap. So hopefully BTCA will help us to or guide us to develop some types of roadmap on this. The second question that we have, build these new customers as a advanced user DFS, obviously we need to work on, and we need to create value for them to use this account. So we need to design new product and services. So we are planning to work with the financial service provider and others. So whether we will have special product or services for this newly adopted customer, as well as for women. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our panelists for these fantastic comments and this discussion. We've learned that, of course, there are massive benefits to mobile financial services, and the emergence of mobile financial services and its effects on financial inclusion is undeniable. Of course, government leadership and strategic partner leadership is crucial here. At the same time, this collaboration between government, service providers, and community-based organizations is why the mobile financial services sector is growing so rapidly, and particularly ensuring that low-income communities are benefiting from this growth. And as we focus more on expansion, there's also the expanding need to raise awareness among these customers, particularly among low-tech literacy, hard to reach, and the female clientele, the consumer base who are in rural areas, for example, to make them aware of course, the many ways that they can meaningfully engage with mobile finances, really understand the benefits of using MFS in their own personal lives, in their savings goals or their goals for their family, but also of the vulnerabilities of being involved with such a system. We've also learned during this conversation that there are limitations to how we can grow the awareness to this just as quickly as we're growing the infrastructure. The system is still dependent on human interaction, one-on-one initiatives where a field officer is getting in touch with the consumer, or the agent is informing the consumer, or also even from the technological end, from the service providers end, there is a huge human resource dedicated to monitoring these services. So it can't be a one player's job, as a lot of our speakers said. It needs collaboration. It needs this handover between stakeholders for us to ensure that mobile financial services is not only bringing prosperity to our consumers from low-income communities, but also protecting them from the many vulnerabilities that are also emerging. Now, thank you to all who've contributed to this conversation. We are hopeful that going forward, as we move away from the pandemic in the next, hopefully very soon in the next couple of months or in the next year, that we are mindful of what we've achieved in the past couple of months, just in terms of the scale of the growth of mobile financial services. And props to Tulbhai for bringing up the idea of including financial services or financial education into school curriculums, and finding innovative ways of informing a hard to reach clientele that can ensure that these ideas of protecting data, protecting your own finances, but also exploiting the services that are out there can be built into not just the person we're trying to target for these benefits, but also the support network around them. They're children who are very much a part of this journey, who in many cases support them into this transition. So we will be sharing a summary of this brilliant conversation in the next couple of days, and through articles, and also a recorded version of this event. Thank you so much for your participation, and a good day to all of our panelists and our partners who've joined us as the audience. Thank you very much, and good day.
Thank you, Raya.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Raya. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night from New Delhi.
Bye.
And the live vision has stopped. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure hearing all of you. Have a nice evening ahead.
You too. Take care.